Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, Monday marked the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and just now President Trump, standing alongside UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, said that the war between the two countries will end, quote, fairly soon or not at all. He also said that he told Prime Minister Starmer that the next step is an achievable ceasefire in Ukraine. European leaders are scrambling to slow down talks over Ukraine's fate after Trump's stunning decision this month to open two-way peace negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Safe to say, Carol, that retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman is watching this really closely.
Certainly. He was the Director for European Affairs on the White House's National Security Council during the first Trump administration, former political military affairs officer for Russia, and a diplomat at the American embassies in Moscow and Kyiv. He is senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute and the author of the new book. It is entitled The Folly of Realism, How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. He joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Nice to have you here with us. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's been a very lovely launch so far, just lots of attention. I think the fact is the book subtitle says it all. It couldn't possibly be more timely, how the U.S. deceived itself about Russia and betrayed Ukraine. We see that playing out in real life over the past couple of days.
We want to get into that. What we want to ask you is, President Trump, at least to start, President Trump said in his press conference with the UK Prime Minister at the White House about the moves being taken to, quote, lay the groundwork for a long-term peace agreement. The president saying this. Do you believe there is a long-term peace agreement that can be made between Russia and Ukraine?
Eventually, there can be. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's that the prediction that it's not going to end at all is wrong, and that it's going to end very soon is also not right. The reason is that I think that the steps that the Trump administration is taking right now, leaning so heavily into a Russia first approach, really kind of being quite flexible, seemingly appeasing Russia with some of the things that it's been seeking, like Ukraine out of NATO, Ukraine giving up territory. Outside of the construct of a negotiation doesn't really make a huge amount of sense. The onus is on Russia to compromise. The Ukrainians are more than willing to compromise. They might not say it publicly, but they recognize that they're not going to be able to regain control of their occupied territory, all of it, anytime soon. That might play out over the course of years. So it's really the Russians. It's in their court. The way that we help that along, we don't ease the burden on Russia. We put additional pressure on Russia. We continue to support Ukraine. We continue to ratchet up a pressure with regards to economic sanctions. And that is what gets Russia to the negotiating table.
There doesn't seem to necessarily be the appetite for a lot of folks in Washington to continue to support Ukraine. We actually saw this play out over the last couple of years. Every time a funding bill would come up, or the idea of providing aid or money to Ukraine would come up. In your view, make the case to us, to our viewers, to our listeners about why the U.S. should support Ukraine.
So first of all, we should grant the fact that the Biden administration didn't do enough to make the case to the American public. And at the same time, Trump, as the de facto leader of the Republican Party, even before he ran for office, was making the case that Ukraine was the bad guy, corrupt, Russia was the good guy. That is not a recipe to sustain resolve behind Ukraine. The merits of the case are pretty straightforward. Ukraine is on freedom's frontier. They're a bulwark against aggression towards Europe itself, NATO specifically, our strongest, most important security ally, and our most important economic partner. So the case here is that if Ukraine breaks, Russia advances, becomes stronger by taking over Ukraine, is more emboldened to conduct aggression against other, within its own backyard, empire building, and against NATO itself. So what we're doing is we're actually making a down payment on security long term by supporting Ukraine. And we've done it in the most efficient way possible. With a modest amount of aid over the course of 3 years, Ukraine has stalled out Russia, has broken its conventional military, has weakened Russia in its mischief making in Europe more broadly. Now we're tipping the scales in Russia's favor, kind of the worst possible scenario, or the worst logic behind advancing U.S. security.
You know, some might suggest that the policies of both Democratic and Republican presidencies, have been to really push back on Russia, right, for a long time and kind of keep them at bay. And so that saying of like, keep your friends close, your enemies even closer, that maybe it is time for a different strategy with Russia between the United States.
Yeah, so that's, I think, contrary to the research in this new book. I look at 6 different administrations, 30 plus years, and what I see is a consistent vein of Russia first. Why? Because we succumbed to hopes that we could accomplish more with Russia. They dangled bright, shiny objects, whether that's arms control, a valid thing that for us to pursue, or climate change, security, or cooperation to root out transnational terror. These things didn't really materialize in any substantial way. We had pockets of success around arms control. And at the same time, we succumbed to fears that if we did more to condemn Russia, as it graduated from just mischief making to hybrid warfare, interfering in elections in our country, but in other countries first along their border, and then graduated to military aggression, we didn't hold the line. We were very, very flexible consistently. We should have instilled some element of conditionality in the way we engaged with them early on, or condemnation and sanction as they graduated through all of these different destabilizing events. I think we've been way too flexible.
So you would just say that President Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin is just a continuation of what we've seen over the last 3 decades? It
is a doubling down and probably the most extreme example of the mistakes that we've made over the past 30 plus years. My research is clear and concise, clear on this point. I've interviewed the presidents involved on both the U.S. side and the Ukrainian side, European leaders, and what I've seen is a consistent vein of a deep flexibility, putting Russia first. We bought into this principle that Russia, large military, large country, was entitled to some sort of privileged sphere of influence. Even when
but were they not with nuclear weapons? Were they not on some level?
On some level, they were. I think the fact is we made a valiant effort in the 1990s to bring them on sides. We made huge investments to try to bring them into the democratic world. Those countless meetings that Clinton had with his counterpart Yeltsin, but those didn't materialize. Right? Russia was just biding its time, letting its economy regain strength. Really getting fat off commodity prices in the 2000s. And when they gathered their strength, then acting aggressively to advance their efforts.
Do you remember back in 2012 when, during that debate between Mitt Romney and President Obama, when Mitt Romney said that the U.S.'s number one geopolitical foe was Russia, and he was kind of laughed out of the room
right
at that point?
Yeah.
Was he right?
He was absolutely right. It looked like a distant prospect because we were in the midst of wars in the Middle East. It looked like it was a bygone era, but if you were paying attention, you saw the telltale signs in the 2000s. Really, years just into Putin's reign, you saw this effort to coerce neighbors, muck around in Ukraine's election that precipitated the Orange Revolution. Anybody that was paying attention to Georgia in 2008 and this war of aggression against Georgia, it was clear, but it just didn't resonate with the American public that wasn't paying attention to the direction that Russia was taking.
All right. So how are you, what are the optics that you are seeing in terms of what kind of deal might ultimately bring this war to an end, and what are the implications of that in your view, and how you think it might play out?
So first of all, I want to give credit to both the Zelensky administration and the Trump administration. They rationalized this crazy $500 billion effort to draw funds out of Ukraine into something that makes sense. This deal that looks to be signed is a good deal. It's something that I talked about when I was in the White House. I was talking about the fact that we could cooperate with Ukraine on rare earths. We need them. We need them to drive our economy. They have them. They need investment. That all makes sense. Whether it actually advances the cause of peace, that's not entirely clear. There's no prescription in there for guarantees that the Ukrainians are looking for. It doesn't really forestall Russian aggression. What I see happening is right now the pattern is the U.S. is easing the pain on Russia, increasing the pain on Ukraine. I don't see how that brings Russia to the table. What I think is going to end up happening is that the Ukrainians are going to have to the Europeans are going to have to step in, double down on support as best as they can. They can't fill the vacuum of U.S. absence. We have the largest military industrial complex in the world, so they can't match that. But they could plug some holes and give the Ukrainians some staying power. Meanwhile, the Russians are taking significant losses. They're also getting drained economically, and they can't act forever with their manpower and then material they're dwindling, digging into Soviet stockpiles. This is going to have to play out over the course of the next 6-9 months when the Russians realize that the Europeans are going to be there, the Ukrainians aren't going anywhere, and when Trump realizes that Putin is just dangling the prospect of some sort of a victory for him, but he's not delivering, Trump is going to want to win also. So we may even relook our policy and come back to support Ukraine, but it's going to be down the road after months of learning the lessons that we should have learned over the past 30 years.
We're speaking with a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He's got a brand new book out. It's called The Folly of Realism: How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. Given your time studying both the governments of Ukraine and Russia, what would you say Vladimir Putin's ultimate goal is?
He's empire building. He's building his legacy. What he wants, what I think Russian elites have wanted really across generations, is they want Russia to be strong. And in order to be strong, that means Ukraine has to be in the fold. It's a central notion to them that great Russia could only be great if it has little Russia. That's what they refer to Ukraine as, and Belarus. Those are the three kind of the trinity of Russian identity. So it wants to fold these countries and regions back in. And then what it's been doing since really the 16th century, the middle of the 16th century, it's expanded in all cardinal directions until it's been stopped, until it's hit a wall with other powers. So if they're given room, they will be aggressive and expand. If they are constrained, that is actually the recipe for Russia to reformat its belief in this multipolar world in which Russia is a central pole, is through a recognition of the fact that they are not who they were under the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union, and they have much more limited capabilities, much more limited aspirations. That is the recipe for Russia to coexist with its neighbors.
Alexander, does that mean then a U.S. backstop of some sort for peacekeeping, means we need to see forces there U.S. forces to backstop Ukraine? Yeah. Is there some other kind of security guarantee that needs to be part of this?
I think that we don't have to put this question of troops on the table inside Ukraine anytime soon. The Ukrainians are capable of defending on their own with adequate support from the West.
Would U.S. workers working in the mineral space and that are on the ground in Ukraine, could that be part of a backstop?
In a peacetime context, I think that when there's a ceasefire, I think there's room for troops, peacekeepers to come in. There's room for workers to come in to cooperate on rare earths. Mm-hmm. I think the ultimate security guarantee is that Ukraine does join NATO, but out in a ceasefire context, somewhere after this war ends, and that prevents Russia from engaging in aggression down the road. I think it's hard. It's beyond the a belief that we would do that right now when there's a hot war going on.
Do you think that's a realistic possibility, given that this administration, including recently, the president said that Trump will never become part of NATO?
I think in this administration, there's no chance. But this administration has a clock also. We're talking about my time horizons beyond 2028 when we return back to our pledges of 2008. That's a long time now, right? 20 years back to bring Ukraine into NATO. Do
you think that this war will continue until then?
I'm not sure if it continues until then, because the Russians don't have the staying power to continue until then. I think the fact is that the both sides will probably reassess deeper into 2025, maybe into the start of 2026. If the Russians are not able to get favorable conditions on the ground, then they'll look for some sort of off-ramp.
It's surprising to hear that, just because it really, truly does seem like President Trump wants to end this war. He talks almost every time, and we hear him. We hear the president speaking a lot. He speaks to the press a lot. He always talks about the young people who are being killed in this conflict. It really seems to affect him. It really seems to motivate him to want to end this war.
Yeah, I think that might be true, but he's going about it repeating the mistakes of the past. I think the fact is, what's clear to me, if he wants to bring peace to the region, he should recognize that it's not the Ukrainians that are an impediment to peace. They're going to have to do what they absolutely must to preserve their sovereignty and territorial integrity, maybe giving up some territory in the short term. But it's the Russians that have absolutely maximalist objectives. They have not given up on Ukrainian capitulation. They have not given up on Ukraine as a neutral player with no military that they could attack at will somewhere down the road. That's the party that he needs to recognize as an impediment to peace.
What can you tell us about, you were in the first Trump White House, first administration, and as we are now seeing the beginning of the second term play out, what insight can you give us about how the president thinks about issues and how things operate and how maybe different it is this time around, if you think it is different? Again, you're looking from the outside.
I think from my perspective, what you have, and you could still see the tension between the policy pros that try to rationalize these decrees that Ukraine has to give $500 billion and come up with this, pretty sophisticated, interesting deal on rare earths. We had a lot more of those folks in the cabinet back then. You had, what were called adults in the room. These were accepted foreign policy professionals. Right now, you have a lot more yes men and loyalists. So you have stumbles from Secretary Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, that makes these declarations as if he's a Fox News anchor instead of the Secretary of Defense holding out that a lot of these issues have to be resolved in negotiations. So I think there's still going to be an effort from the professional class to try to add, clarity and resolve these pronouncements that Trump makes. It's just much tougher because I don't think the president's he has yes men and he's not getting, the most knowledgeable counsel. I'd advise them to read my book and they could see what it's shameless plug there, but to understand the mistakes of the past and how we can do better. The way we do better is we're not so transactional. We do not look at everything as a deal where we need to maximally extract. I mean, this is not a business environment. We can't maximally extract.
It's the balance of every administration because there are deals all the time, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, right? Of deals being made to benefit citizens, countries. Yeah. But there's always kind of a give and take.
But you want the Buffett deal. You want the Buffett deal that's long-term, long-sighted, and that's where the growth is over the course of, not just a cycle, but over a long term. And what I'm prescribing here is that we're not so transactional. We start thinking about the things that really matter to us. Democracies are the bedrock of both our security and our economic prosperity. That's where we should be investing resources, not the bright shiny object that's immediately in front of us.
I think it's fair to say, much of your career was not political in the sense of partisan politics.
None of it was until the very end.
So not none of it, but until the very end. You became certainly a lightning rod for politics. And, there are a lot of folks on the right who don't necessarily agree with you, especially after you testified in 2019 in the impeachment hearing. That said, do you still have the ear of people in the government right now? Do you have communications with them? Do you feel like you can talk to them?
So I feel like I could talk to them because I understand the terms in which to talk to them about, that Trump wants to be the winner and how to get a deal or something like that. So I could talk to him understanding the Trump White House and a little bit about his state of mind. But I have to contend with the proclivity is he likes Russia and he dislikes Ukraine. He likes strongmen. He doesn't like our democratic allies. So there's only so much you could do there. At the same time, I don't really have the means to talk to Republicans. I'm happy to try and talk to them on the merits. You mentioned that I became a political figure. I never really thought I still don't think of myself that way. I try to talk in terms of national security. In my 22 years in the military, working at the Pentagon, writing the strategy for Russia, all these different roles. What is it that's best for U.S. national security? Now, some people might see that. Being drawn into testifying in front of Congress when I reported presidential corruption is a political act, but it wasn't. It was a duty as somebody that swore an oath to the Constitution and then called by Congress to testify about what I witnessed. But I feel like there's not that much opportunity for the sides to talk together at all. It's not just me. It's communications between the folks that are perceived to be on the left and the folks that are perceived to be on the right. Although I don't know if I meet that bill. Some people might call me a hawk or something of that nature because I think we need a stronger, more muscular policy towards Ukraine. So it's just a moment where we're very, very tribal and we're not communicating with each other, even if it's on the merits.
Any regret in the action that you did in terms of testifying before Congress? I know you were subpoenaed, but we've seen subpoenas be issued and not everybody kind of testifies. So
absolutely not. I feel like those people that skirted their responsibilities for whatever personal, they did it for personal reasons. They did it because they didn't want to be the lightning rod or subject to criticism. That wasn't my job. My job was as a military officer, I was obligated by law to appear and testify. If I had been given a lawful order by Trump back then to not testify, things may have ended up differently. It would have had to play out in the courts. But the bottom line is I felt like what I did was right. I felt like I fulfilled my duty as an officer. And I could look my daughter, who's now 14, in her eyes and not say that I shirked responsibility. And continue to this day to frankly advocate for the things that matter to me, including a book that lands a month into Trump's administration that's critical of the mistakes that we seem to be repeating instead of learning from the past.
One thing I want to ask you, as a member of the military retired, we've seen the firing of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We've seen other military leaders being let go. Also, the top lawyers, which is considered so important in terms of military actions and making sure that there is kind of a level of security, safety, if you will. Help us understand the military within a second Trump White House. And I do wonder about the independence of, because there are layers when we talk about democracy. There's judicial, there's like we talk about checks and balances, but military is an important part.
So the military is non-political. It serves at the pleasure of the president. Everybody swears an oath to the Constitution, and officers in that chain of command, the commander-in-chief being the president of the United States. The thing is, this is not about these folks being disloyal. It's about the ability to ensure that when the president directs any element of the executive branch, that he has absolute loyalists that don't question anything. That was the reason that these 3-star JAGs were fired, these attorneys, is because they interpret the law. They'll determine and advise their 4-star bosses on whether the law orders that are coming down are legal. Now, the military is going to follow the president's instructions if it's a lawful order. Lawful, awful, they'll follow the instructions because he's the commander-in-chief. But what they won't do is they won't follow illegal orders. And I think this effort to sideline these 3 stars is to make sure that nobody interprets any instructions that come from the president. Not that anything has happened yet, but at any point in the future, that everything is interpreted as legal and that the officers in the military follow blindly, really.
So a guardrail has been removed.
Absolutely, a guardrail has been removed. These I know some of these 4 stars that I served with them, that have served. That none of them did anything disloyal. I think on the face of it, it was. I think it was an attack on this whole DEI idea that there was some diversity amongst these folks, but all of these folks were going to follow the president's orders as long as they were legal. But that wasn't good enough.
Does it worry you that this guardrail has been removed?
I think it's a warning sign, and it's something that we should be mindful and cautious about. But we need to understand that the military is a large institution. These 4 stars have deputies that are 4 stars also, and the 3 stars that were removed have deputy 2 stars. So there are plenty of layers of folks that are going to hold the line. It just has gotten a little bit harder than it was before.
Well, you talk about levels, right, in terms of holding everybody to the true in military. What about someone like Secretary of the State Department, Marco Rubio? Like, what are your thoughts about him in dealing with global diplomacy and talking with leaders directly, and yet obviously they're at the grace of the president? So
I've had plenty of criticism of Marco Rubio in the past on policy differences, but he is a policy hand. He's been in the Senate for a while. He's been on intel committees. He understands the state of play in the world, the seriousness of these negotiations with Russia, how that might implicate Chinese aggression in the Pacific. He is going to try to do the best he can. I'm comfortable. Well, I think he's going to try to do the best he can, whether he has the courage, the fortitude to withstand actors that don't want to really care or don't care about national security is a different story. I think Mike Waltz probably is in the same category. Mm-hmm. They're never going to criticize the president directly because they know what happens. That's the lessons have been learned in the first Trump administration, and I think they're going to try to probably do the best they can to rationalize some of the things that have been directed into policy that could advance U.S. national security interests. I have more confidence in these folks than I do in the purely political actors that really are unprepared for the positions they've been put into.
What do you say to people who say Alexander Vindman has got an axe to grind against the president? You testified against him. You sued some allies of the president for alleged intimidation over impeachment hearings. So what do you say to those? Because you've got this book out. It is very timely considering the geopolitics that consume much of what we talk about. What do you say to them?
My axe is sharp, actually, and I'm prepared to wield it in order to advance U.S. national security. And that's what my life has been about, a life of service to defend the nation. And if I feel like there needs to be something called out or criticism on the merits of national security and the dangers this country faces, I will wield that axe. But frankly, I don't like Trump. I mean, he personally attacked my family and targeted my family, made us the targets of harassment and threats and things of that nature. But mainly, this is about this was my doctoral dissertation. Is about how do we keep this country safe and prosperous.
Just taking a hard turn in the last 30 seconds.
Because we all need to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah, I've had this book on my desk, and whenever someone walks by, they say, I loved Vindman in Curb Your Enthusiasm. The penultimate season, you and Larry David.
Yeah.
How was it?
It was lots of fun. I did that season and actually the final episode. And it was a joy to do that. It was way outside of my comfort zone, being dragged into the public eye, but open to these new experiences, all sorts of different friends that I never had before, being able to maybe leverage my voice in a way I didn't before. So it's a blessing in that regard that I could lighten people's lives on Curb or give people some hope on the national security front. I'll embrace it, but I don't look back.
Well, if you talk to Larry, tell him we need another season, even though there's a finale. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time. We've been speaking with retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. His brand new book out. It's out now. It's called The Folly of Realism, How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. Well, you guys know this because you've tried to schedule a doctor's appointment in your lifetime. There's a shortage of healthcare workers.
There is.
Dr. Iman Abuzeid is trying to address the shortage of healthcare workers. She's the co-founder and CEO of Incredible Health. It's a marketplace that connects nurses and hospitals. We've spoken to her quite a few times over the last few years about all things healthcare. She joins us this afternoon from Austin, Texas. Dr. Abuzeid, big news yesterday in terms of what you and the team at Incredible Health are doing. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to address this through the lens of what's happening in the Trump administration right now. You're a physician, trained in the UK. You got your MBA at Wharton. News today that Stanford University is implementing a hiring freeze as colleges and universities across the U.S. confront this threat of severe funding cuts from the Trump administration. Do you think this pullback from the National Institutes of Health have the potential to make the healthcare worker shortage worse, or will it not affect it?
That's a great question. So for the NIH budget reductions that are being proposed and currently blocked by a judge at the moment, we have to keep in mind that academic medical centers, which are like essentially the top hospitals in the country, do rely on NIH budget cuts to fund their research, and that's key research that I'm referring to, including cancer research. So if we want to make sure that America stays number one in terms of innovation and bringing the best treatments and technologies to the American people, we do need to consider that budget and realize how important it is to funding important research.
So what's the suggestion you would make, perhaps?
So I would really recommend that we don't actually cut the NIH budget, just given how important it is to driving research and to driving innovation. And many hospitals and health systems, including those that are academic medical centers, do rely on that budget to fund their research operations as well.
Having said that, in a pocket, an air pocket, while there might be a shock to the system, it's something we talked about with an earlier guest. Ultimately, over time, will research funding come from other places, whether it's the private sector, whether it's foundations? You know how money, when it makes sense, will tend to go to the places it needs to.
Budgets for hospitals and health systems, including research budgets, does come from a wide range of areas. It's not just 100% reliance on the federal budget. But the federal budget is a big piece of it. We can also talk about Medicaid and Medicare proposed cuts as well. And the funding from the federal government does drive revenue to the U.S. healthcare system. And so if there are any reductions there, it does put a lot of pressure on health systems to keep even more, pay even more attention to their costs. And in the area that we're in, that Incredible Health is in, and it's around managing the healthcare workforce costs. Over the last couple of years, healthcare labor costs have gone up by 21%. And so if there's any threats to potential revenue, then paying attention to that labor cost is always going to be critical as well.
How does, the group that you know so well, the nursing industry, if you will, and those individuals that make that up, what are the conversations they are having in today's environment, whether it's, trying to bring in all the news flow out of DC? I'm just curious, what's top of mind for them in terms of concerns or things that they think might be helpful?
When it comes to the healthcare workforce, including the nurses, and we're about to talk about the technicians as well, they're looking for career stability. They're looking for opportunities to expand their career, to learn more, to support patients, and they're looking for career advancement opportunities, flexibility. So, any potential changes from that coming from DC is a possible threat. So they are really, certainly concerned about what's happening. But the truth is, a lot of this has not been implemented or approved yet. So everyone's still just focusing on their career and getting the job done.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those technicians, because at Incredible Health, you guys made a big announcement yesterday about branching out into a sort of not away from what you're doing with nurses in hospitals, but expanding the platform, the talent acquisition platform. Where do technicians fall in the healthcare chain?
Yesterday we announced a big expansion. We are now the first and the largest software and AI-enabled career marketplace for healthcare workers. We have over 1 million nurses in over 1,500 hospitals, and we're now expanding to technicians as well as surgery centers and home health. Now, technicians make up 30% of the healthcare workforce. This includes surgical technicians, imaging technicians, lab technicians. They're important for the operations of a hospital and for delivering patient care, including imaging services, surgical services, lab services. And so the shortage that is happening there right now, which is very reminiscent of the nursing shortage in 2021 when it was very severe, is underreported. The technician shortage in the U.S. today is the worst it's ever been, and we are on track to have it be impacting patient care. I'm referring to delays in surgeries, delays in emergency services, delays in imaging as well.
Remind everybody about how the platform works. Carol and I were talking about it a little earlier. It's a two-sided platform, so you have hospitals use it, but also the healthcare workers use it as well?
That's right. So our hospitals and health systems use Incredible Health software and our AI technology to hire nurses and technicians now in permanent roles. Our claim to fame is that the employers are applying to the healthcare professionals instead of the other way around. Of course, the healthcare professionals love that. And then we've also automated the screening and the matching, so hiring happens very rapidly, ideally in less than 20 days. For healthcare professionals, it means that they can advance their careers more rapidly. They can expand their career opportunities too, and explore a whole range of care settings, including hospitals, home health, and surgery centers. And then for the employers, they're able to more rapidly reduce their temporary labor, which impacts which helps address their costs, as well as help them grow and expand and deliver on more quality care and patient services too.
I have to say, Dr. Abuzeid, every time I talk to you or we talk to you, and because we've all been there where we have to wait to see doctors, where we're in offices that are stressed and strained because they don't have enough nursing or technicians. Is anything getting better? And we've just got about 30 seconds left here. Do you see any signs that there's more coming into the workforce, or no? Just quickly.
Yeah, so the group of healthcare workers has certainly increased over the last few years. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge we're having is that the U.S. population has increased in age as well. So as demand goes up, we're still struggling to keep up with the supply of healthcare workers.
Okay. All right. Good to always check in with you. Take care, and thank you so much for us as we jump around all the news that's happening. Dr. Iman Abuzeid, she's the co-founder and CEO of Incredible Health.
Carol, when you go to the doctor,
yes,
your ears don't get a lot of love. The doctor takes your blood pressure.
Right.
The doctor checks your blood for everything.
Been there.
The ears, they don't get a lot of love. It kind of seems to be changing with Apple coming out with new hearing features with its iOS. want to hear what Frank Lin has to say about it. Dr. Frank Lin is director of the Cochlear Center for Hearing at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He joins us from San Francisco. The Bloomberg School of Public Health, it is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, the founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Doctor, thanks for joining us. It does seem like ears in the middle of your life don't get a lot of love. Yeah, if it hurts, the doctor will look in there. But as far as hearing tests go, it doesn't become an issue until there's a perceived problem. You get these hearing tests when you're a kid, maybe when you're middle-aged. Why don't ears get love?
You know, Tim, it's such a great question. I think it's something we honestly take for granted. That's why, you're so dependent on your hearing for everything you do on a daily basis. And for everyone, as we get older, our hearing changes. But people assume, well, it's just getting older, doesn't mean anything. But that's sort of been turned on its head over the last 10, 15 years, a lot of research, which is why there's so much more attention now to thinking about hearing as not just a late life thing, but as sort of a life course aspect of your life that you've seen to monitor and track like anything else in your life.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I've actually had a family member, young, where there was some hearing, maybe not at 100% and a little scary, but good to be kind of on it early on. What is the importance of doing this earlier, paying more attention to our hearing earlier on?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times people used to think of hearing as being this binary. Either you have quote unquote normal hearing, or all of a sudden one day you have hearing loss. And it's the silliest way to think about it, because like anything else in your life, let's say you think about your weight, or let's say your blood pressure. These are metrics that just change continuously over your life. It's not all of a sudden one day you have high blood pressure. It's been creeping up for many, many years. So I think the way we're thinking about hearing now, it's like a continuum. It's a number, like literally a number you can get from your hearing test called audiogram. It's something you can track over your lifetime, beginning as a teenager. And as you look at that number, not as a binary, you have hearing loss all of a sudden one day, you realize over your course of your life, your hearing changes bit by bit. And because of that, throughout the course of your life, you can take steps to protect your hearing. And more importantly, especially with all these new technology coming out from Apple and other companies, you can begin using various hearing technologies throughout your life to help you hear better. Like case in point right now, as I talk to you, I'm using my AirPods Pro, right? So you can actually turn on the hearing aid feature on AirPods Pro, which I have done, and it helps me in certain situations. I don't even all the time, but it helps me every now and then. I'm 48, I'm classically like in the camp where you see, so I'm middle age, but not really worried about hearing yet. But as you think about it as a number, it becomes something you can act on over your entire lifetime.
Yeah, and I would also imagine, given your profession, you're pretty cognizant about taking care of the health of your ears. Hey, speaking of that and the technology, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health has released this new app. It's a free app. It's called it tests it's the hearing number app, and it provides this sort of scale as to how you can quantify your hearing. How does it work?
Yeah, so basically, this is where like technology is really advanced. Like years ago, to get a hearing test, you had to go see an audiologist, and you go into a booth, or even see an ENT sometimes, and you do this test where you hear different tones, and you just say how loud it is, and you get this report back. The thing that's changed with technology, with smartphones in the last few years, is that you can do this test yourself on your phone yourself. So what we've done at Hopkins now, we've created our own app. It's called the Hearing Number app. It's for Android, iOS. It's completely free. We don't track any data. There's no advertising. And basically in about 5 minutes, with a pair of just basic Bluetooth headphones or wired headphones, you can actually learn your hearing number. And what the hearing number is, it basically just tells you, quite simply, the softest speech sound you can hear in decibels. So it can be range as low as -10 for a kid who has really good hearing, like my daughter's 18, hers is a -5, for instance. And it gets higher as you get older and your hearing declines by a bit. So mine's around 10 decibels, which is good, but clearly not as good as my daughter's. So that hearing number, the technical term is called the 4-frequency pure tone average. It's a number that's derived from your audiogram, but it's a number. As you think about that number, you can literally track over time. You can compare yours and your spouses, and get your kids, get your parents, and you'll see that there are differences, and it's reflected in how someone experiences the world around them, how much trouble they may or might be having in certain situations.
Doctor, I'm very cognizant of, when it comes to earbuds and wearing headphones, of making sure that the music isn't too loud. But I've recently discovered bone induction technology, and it's been great for when I work out, because, you can kind of like, if you're going for a run or something, you can hear what's going on around you. Is there any issue? But I have to turn it all the way up. And I'm wondering if there's any issue with hearing loss with that type of technology. Like, do people who use that tech, do they still have to be concerned, or can they go full blast?
No, you definitely still have to be concerned. Like anything else, like when you hear through like shocks, for example, those bone conduction, hearing, basically headphones, which I use when I run too. It's still stimulating your inner ear. So basically, your inner ear, your cochlea per se, it's called. That's the inner. It's susceptible to noise damage over your entire lifetime, right? Without a doubt. So you get sound in through the air, sound going through ear canal. But you can also get through bone conduction, which is how those things work. Those can also be, without a doubt, can be too loud and hurt your ears in the long run, but without a doubt. That's why a lot of times, I'm not sure with the shocks. I haven't used mine in a while, but with a lot of newer earbuds, let's say from Apple, other companies, they actually constantly monitor how much noise exposure you're getting through the headphones, and even come with alerts per se if you're using the headphones too loud, which is really, really good to see.
Gotta say, I just downloaded the app.
That's what's speaking.
So I'm gonna kind of
She's
check
also
it out.
listening, though, I promise.
Listen, for years and years of headphones and earbuds and things, I'm not quite sure what works. I don't know. And my husband's hearing, it's really funny. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't work really well.
That is interesting.
Isn't that funny?
It's
How
like
that
my 6-year-old, too.
it works with spouses and kids. Hey, listen, this was really interesting. Really appreciate it. Dr. Franklin, he's director of the Cochlear Center for Hearing at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and of course it's supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Dr. Lin joining us out there in San Francisco. Thank you so much.